Today's guest is Eric Siu. He's an investor, a podcaster, an author, and the chairman of Single Grain and ClickFlow. He's written a book on a fascinating topic. Leveling Up is the name of the book. He's talking about how to apply the principles of gaming to master the game of life. In this episode, Eric starts by revealing why playing games can be your superpower to creating a thriving business. Then we dive into 3 specific power-ups that you can use to accelerate your growth. And then finally, we are going to talk about focus, how you should think about focus if you are an entrepreneur who has tons of ideas. Now, Eric is a great guy. He's very open. He's very vulnerable. He talks about his own failures, and you are just going to love this episode. Eric, thank you so much for being on the show. Why don't we start with a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so let's see, the background can go deep, but I would just say I used to play a lot of games growing up, and always thought to myself that if I could just apply the feeling, the excitement I get from gaming into real life, I would be set, because I would just be kind of, to your point, you're passionate about it, right? And so I struggled through college, struggled through high school, couldn't find my way. And then eventually my friend told me about this digital marketing thing as I was working a dead end job coming out of college. And from there, I never really looked back. From there, I just continued to try to level up my digital marketing skills, which eventually led to the next thing. It's like, oh, I should probably learn more about business. Okay, then I got to learn more about culture, about hiring. So to me, it's all a big game. And I enjoy waking up every day. With the same feeling I had when I was maybe 12, 13 years old. So I think business is the ultimate game, and I just enjoy playing it. And then, with the things that I do, the canvas I have right now is the podcast that I have, the podcasts that I have, the software companies, and also, the other businesses that I invest in, and also the ad agency. So it's just continuing to build that audience while continuing to build business, with no real end game in mind. It's just to continue to, play the infinite game. And that's what it is.
Wow. Why should the people listening right now and watching right now, why should they see life as a game?
Yeah, when you think of, so I know not everybody can relate to gaming, but I think a lot of people might have played sports. So when you think about sports, what did you learn from sports? Maybe you learn teamwork, maybe you learn communication, you learn resilience, but more than anything, you were having fun on the field, right? I think for the most people, you're having fun. Games, the same thing. Games are the same thing. They're designed to make things fun, designed to make things competitive. And so when you apply that lens to life, life becomes not a big stressor. It's just fun. Like even through when the pandemic first hit, you know instead of looking at things through the lens of stress, it's like, okay, this is an opportunity, and I'm gonna enjoy this experience. This is a learning experience. I'm gonna learn from it. And so when you're able to reframe your mindset into thinking about stress or any of these things as, oh, this is part of the game, it's part of the journey. I'm not saying it's not difficult to get through, but it becomes easier to get through because your mind looks at it differently. So even that rewiring how you think about things is really upgrading your mind, and that's part of playing the game too.
Yeah. It's so interesting that you mentioned your mindset when the pandemic first hit, because first of all, I'm sure you'll agree, first and foremost, the thoughts are about the human element of this and the suffering people are going through. But what I found very interesting is that my mind went to the same thing as you then, which is like, well, we live in this world where all of the problems are, it feels sometimes like all the problems are already solved, and all of a sudden the world is completely different. We have a whole set of like almost an infinite set of new problems. It's like an entrepreneur's playground all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's I think the founders I saw that looked at the pandemic as an opportunity, those are the ones that really stepped up. And then the ones that crumbled in terms of stress, and I get it, like if you're running a restaurant business or if you're in travel, it's probably a lot tougher for you. And I can't pretend to know what they went through, but but you've seen people pivot, and they've worked their way through. I remember there's a travel company actually based in, I think it's based in maybe the UK, but they changed over into focusing on travel into a completely different industry, right? And so that's what it is. And you look at it as an opportunity, and you take action instead of just kind of sitting there. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. So, you when you were into gaming and you saw these parallels between leveling up in games and leveling up in life, what are the key lessons, the key takeaways from gaming that we can implement in our lives to be more successful?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, I draw a lot of parallels in my book. And so one of them is, and I think most people don't like this because there's cognitive dissonance. Most people don't like the idea of copying or stealing. So one of the books is about kind of, I think the title is thievery. And the whole idea here is that you can steal ethically. And Steve Jobs said that everything in life is just a remix. So even, Apple is saying, hey, like we're building on the top of the shoulders of giants. And so not everything has to be original. And even if you look at SpaceX, Elon has rockets going into space. Still, first principles, how do you build a rocket? And then build on top of it. How do we send the rockets back? And so I remember when I was playing a game called EverQuest, we were playing it was a best of the best tournament on the server. So if you won, you got a new title. Everyone looked at you as a champion. And I got demolished in preliminaries, and I didn't have a strategy, didn't know what to do. And I got lucky enough with the time pairings where I got to see someone that was really good with good strategies and tactics. I just copied that person, but I just added my spin to it. And then I was able to sweep through everyone else, didn't lose after that, and then was able to win. But that sticks with me today because that was one of the key moments where I copied and I won something, right? And it's really important to me as a 12, 13-year-old because I wasn't good at sports, I wasn't good at school, but that was a big confidence builder for me. Now let's use Apple again as an example. They went into Xerox in, I think, the 70s or 80s. They copied the mouse, they copied a graphical user interface, they copied a lot of things, right? And they just iterated on it. So we are, whether we like it or not, we're copying or building on, we're iterating on top of what other humans have built, and that's what it is. That's a big piece of it. And the final, there's a bunch of other chapters, and I call them power ups because it's helping these people build the right habits, and I think habits compound. But the idea of resilience, right? And I think poker does a good job because poker is a constant beatdown. You can bring your A game for 3 to 6 months, even a year, and lose for the year, right? It's just variance, it's math. But it teaches you about how to deal with frustrations, teaches you how to manage your bankroll, teaches you how to deal with or read people. There's just a lot that goes into it. And you don't want to go through like a downward spiral, right? And poker kind of forces you through all that, which is why you see some of the top investors in the world talking about how you should play poker and how they play poker a ton, right? So, and also probably the most important thing from poker is there's a book called Thinking in Bets from a poker player named Annie Duke. And when you think of the investments that you make, whether it's your time or your money, you have to think in bets, right? And poker is basically that's what it is, and it easily applies to real life.
Yeah. Um, how do you think about focus? I think I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs, and I think what's fascinating is some people have this idea that like you just do one thing and just do one thing really, really well. And then you've got other entrepreneurs, and typically entrepreneurs have a lot of ideas. And so I see that you're chairman of 2 companies, you've got a podcast, you've now written a book. And I think like, wow, like clearly you've got a lot of energy and a huge skill set. And I'm wondering, how do you think about focus? Maybe also specific to games. Maybe if you just play one game, you will be world class. But if you play 5, maybe not, right? How do you think about that?
Yep, that's a great question and a great point. I would say ideally, I would just focus on one thing. Because it's easy to look at it this way, right? If you just have one lane that you're focused on, it's going to grow a lot faster. But if you have 5 different lanes, I think you'll grow, but the pace is going to be slower because your attention is split. So the best way to think about it is if you can't focus for the life of you, I would say if I were to go back when I was maybe, I don't know, 25 years old or whatever, I'd focus on one company, get it going, right? And then use the cash flows to kind of reinvest in other durable sources of revenues, exponential sources of revenue, and then hire operators for each of those, right? So Berkshire Hathaway does a good job of this. Tiny Capital, they do over 100 million in aggregate with all their companies. they just take the profits from their web design agency, Meta Labs, and then they Meta Lab, and then they just go buy other businesses like job board. They bought Dribble, all these different things. And so I think that's a great model long term. It allows you to sit at the top and you can jump in and help these businesses as needed. And that's largely what I'm doing now. But in the very beginning, the thing I would have changed is not trying to do too many things at once, and focusing, right? So I think, when Bill Gates and Warren Buffett met each other, it's like, what's the key to success? They both said focus, right? And I think when you look at Apple, they started with one thing first. They focused on it. I think once you get that one thing right, you can go ahead and branch out to other stuff. So that's what I would say.
Nice. When do you think you've got something? What's that moment where you can say, yeah, this is good enough? Because things can always be better or bigger, right?
Yeah, I think some people would say, oh, grow it till you can't grow it anymore. And then others would say, I mean, when it's time to, when you feel like you've got it, you've got it stable, and that's more of a gut feeling than anything. You've stabilized it, you can move on to other stuff, right? When I took over Single Grain, which is my ad agency, the that was a game within itself, because the four other partners didn't want to be a part of it anymore. And that was when I was able to jump in, where I had points of leverage where I could say, hey, I'm going to buy the company for $2. It's a failing company. They all wanted out. And then, if I were able to turn it around, the bet was, talking about thinking in bets, asymmetric payoff here is, if it works out, I can take those cash flows and reinvest it, right? That was always the thesis. And so, and sorry, what was the prompt again? It was like escaping me now.
It was about when to move on.
Yeah. Okay, so what happened there was, when I took over the company, we were negative. And after a year, I had no idea what I was doing. We dropped all the way down to one employee. So it got worse and worse. I decided the right timing to step out. I read this book called Rocket Fuel, and it has this concept of visionaries and integrators, right? It seems like you know what it is. And so after I read that, when I hired my first integrator, things started flying, right? Things started moving a lot faster. I was like, okay, all I need to do is hire good managers for each of these, all the things I want to work on. And then I'm a good starter. And I'm a good starter. I'm good at creating content, right? And then that allows me to kind of do deals, right? So I'm just going to focus on that. That's probably the most highest leverage activity that I can do, but it takes a lot of time to get there. And you have to constantly be reframing, what are you doing every day? What are you doing every 90 days? What are you doing every year? What's a 25-year plan? That's all in there.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I didn't know the backstory to Single Grain, that you bought it for $2. Can you give us a bit more detail on how that came about and how you made that decision?
Yeah. So I was 27 years old at the time, and I was brought into the last company I was at before that. We had a great product. We had a great team. I just needed to add marketing, and we were able to kind of move on from there. And this company was a new challenge where I never really wanted to come into an agency again, because agencies are not very scalable. And also I knew that our service, the company was hurting because it was only doing SEO services, and Google's algorithms had changed. So basically the business model was invalid overnight, or the way we were doing it became invalid. So the challenge here was, do I want to, I've proven that I can help a company that has a great product and a great team grow. Can I come turn around a company? So that was the new challenge. That's the level up there. And 6 months into it, they all saw that it was getting worse. And they're like, yeah, we're gonna get out, and then you should get out too. There's no brand equity here. There's nothing. And so basically, what I negotiated was $1 for my podcast co-host Neil's shares for 10%, and another 10% for someone else's for $1, and then the rest would be paid through the profits of the company, with a contingency that I put in that if the company failed, I would owe nothing. So, by the way, I had no idea what I was doing, and little did I know I was doing M&A, right? So I'm air quoting because it was like, who knew that I was doing anything that seemed right? But long story short, that's how I was able to get it. But it took it went from, when I took it over, it got even worse, right? Because I had no idea what I was doing. I read a book called Let My People Go Surfing, and I took it literally. So I was like, oh yeah, let my people go surfing. Not going to come to the office, not going to do anything. And then I had people calling me saying there's people coming into the office, dressed like unprofessionally and just eating chips, watching Family Guy and all that. So it's my fault, right? I made it even worse. But fortunately, I got just in the nick of time. I read the right things, I hired the right people, and it worked out. And yeah, that's what happened there.
Yeah, that's fascinating. In my first entrepreneurial venture, I made all those similar mistakes, and I think one of the biggest ones that people make, and that I certainly made, is like hiring the wrong people,
Yeah.
and not even knowing really what I needed. And so when you said you've read Rocket Fuel, I've also read the book, and I highly recommend it if you are an entrepreneurial type, very visionary, and you've got tons of ideas, and you struggle to focus, and you struggle to organize, um, to, to, to essentially organize what it takes to make that a reality. Now, the caveat I'll give there, which is I think the mistake that I made with my first venture, and it sounds like maybe you made at some point, but then you did it well. The caveat is that person has to be the right person, and finding that person is not easy. So, Eric, my question is like, how did you find that person? How did you define who your integrator needed to be to your visionary?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm gonna be honest, I think I got really lucky. I put up a job post, and then someone, volunteered. I mean, he was trying to move to the U.S. from Australia, and so he really needed a job. And the guy came from an HR background, and then seemed very like a go getter. And he became our operations lead and helped with everything, right? From a recruiting standpoint, even sometimes helping with sales. He just helped with a lot. And without him, we wouldn't be where we are right now. But it's, I would say now what we do that's pretty effective. There's a book called WHO with a question mark, and the idea of having a scorecard with specific outcomes you're trying to accomplish and then competencies, that goes a long way for us, and it makes our hiring process a lot more consistent. I wish we had that back then, but I would just say I got lucky. So
Nice. So, why did you decide to write a book? I think a lot of people feel they have a book inside them. What was the trigger?
yeah, I think look, over 3 billion in the world, 3 billion people in the world have played games, and I think sports is widely acknowledged because sports has been around for thousands of years, right? People understand the benefits of it. To me, gaming is a training ground as well. It's a shadow world. You're going in there, you're training, you're learning resilience, teamwork, and all that. You can come back, you can translate that into the real world. So, for example, my communication skills are a lot faster. I react a lot faster. I actually even talk very fast too. But even typing, right? When I'm typing now, I can go up to 144 words per minute. And that's not to brag. I'm just saying that was trained through gaming. And so, you know, I think it has a negative stigma, but when you think about it, gaming actually creates leaders. Some of the best leaders in the world have played games, right? Elon Musk admits it, Mark Zuckerberg as well. We have people that were champions before in gaming that have led multiple companies. And so, it has a negative stigma, but look, it's to me, it's virtually the same benefits as sports. It's just don't overdo it. Obviously, take care of yourself, and same thing with sports. Don't overdo it. Don't overtrain, right? So there has to be a good balance. I would say, once you get enough training from the shadow world, gaming, bring that into real life and go make a bigger impact on the world, make a bigger impact on the people around you. So I think people need to understand that the skills they've gained, the power ups they got from gaming, the habits they gained from gaming, they translate into the real world, and they need to have the confidence to understand that life is just all about kind of building on top of each level. And whatever level you're at right now is just because you haven't been the boss at that level.
Mm. And why a book? I guess you could have chosen many different formats to share that message. I understand you've identified that message needs to be shared. So why specifically a book?
Yeah. So, you know, and I've had this question asked a couple of times. It's when you think about it, for me at least, I've had Kindles, I have my iPad. I can't I need to have a book. I need to focus, right? So I like the physical touch of a book and being able to go through the pages. I think it's very I don't think books are going anywhere for a while. And I think it has a sense of permanence around it, right? It's when you touch something, it's much different than just reading like a PDF or something like that. So I think that's a big piece of it. But other than that, yes, we will have an Audible version coming out. We'll have the Kindle as well. So we've given the other options. I just think it's when you think about a business card as an example, hey, just take my book, right? So you talked about focus earlier. Again, coming back to what I said in the very beginning, it creates that element of focus that you can't really get from the other mediums.
Got it. And what was your? I mean, you talk about the game of life, so I imagine that there's a strategic element to to writing this book? Like, what do you hope it will lead to, or what result do you hope it will get for you?
Yeah, you know what's interesting? I talked to one of my friends who's a bestseller, and his book leads into it does lead into business, right? This one, the I never had an ulterior motive to try to drive it to try to drive sales for the business, as an example. Now, that being said, I like to create optionality, right? So what I mean by that is I went through a hybrid publishing model where I have the rights to the book. It will get distributed at airports and things like that. But as a marketer, I can do any type of book funnel or any creative stuff I want because I have creative control over it. So, I might tie that in with our training in the future, because the idea is if you help people level up in terms of habits and power ups first, the next step would be, hey, I'll teach them what I know. I'll teach them marketing. And the next step after that is I'll teach you how to do a business, right? So there's kind of this pyramid. I want to call it a pyramid scheme, but there's this progression right here to help people grow. But that's not top of mind for me. I think top of mind for me is giving people the confidence to understand that, hey, as long as you build the right habits, and you have from gaming, you can make a big difference on the world. You should have more confidence, because if I can do it, right? Almost got kicked out of high school, almost got kicked out of college, got fired from 2 jobs, then anybody can do it.
Let's finish up with a question that's just escaped my mind. That's so funny. About marketing. A lot of our customers and our community and the people listening to this podcast, they are coaches, experts, teachers, and they're monetizing their skills. And a lot of them haven't come from a marketing background. And so one of their biggest challenges is, how do I effectively turn strangers into customers? What is the one marketing initiative you've done that's had the most surprising results?
Yeah. I mean, if I were to classify it into, at a macro level, it's thinking about learning in public, right? And a lot of people in the tech world talk about that. They're sharing numbers, they're sharing what they're building and all that. So for me, the only reason anything has been able to happen is because I've been so focused on learning and getting better, and then also teaching it, right? Whether it's through, back in the day, doing blog posts, starting podcasts, videos, things like that. When I first started doing my first podcast, Leveling Up, which has been 7 or 8 years now, after the first year, I was only getting 9 downloads a day. And I was spending 6 hours a week on it. By the way, I was trying to save single grain at the same time. Very stupid idea. And so I continued on after the second year, spending 6 hours a day. I was only getting 30 downloads a day, 6 hours a week. I was only getting 30 downloads a day, right? So still 900 downloads a month. It's not that good. And, I kept going. And then now when I think of the 2 podcasts combined, we're at about 46, 47 million downloads. But that took time to compound. And so what I learned from that is, it takes a long time to build an audience. It takes a long time to build a business up. And, but if you stick with it, it's going to be good, because one of the highest forms of leverage that you can have is around media, right? So you can create content, people follow you, and then you can go out there and create a community, people interact with each other. And that way you actually have a moat around your business. So you almost become, in my opinion, you become indestructible. You can't lose, because your worst case scenario, if you have someone that follows you, and if you have a community, is your worst case scenario is probably someone else's best case scenario, right? Where someone's going to want to hire you for a couple $100,000 a year. That is like the dream for most people in the world. And so again, I think about how you can create leverage with content, and then make your worst case scenario everyone else's dream.
Oh, I love that. I also love learning in public. It's not a phrase I've heard before, but I have heard, don't create, document, and I think maybe that's sort of thinking along the same lines.
Well, kind of. I mean, you're referring to Gary Vee, right? With the documenting
Yeah.
piece. So he's had people follow him around, but he never shares anything that's kind of internal, right? He sometimes might share numbers, but when I talk about people building in public, if you go to Twitter, there's a guy named Paul. He runs a company called Copy.ai, and he shares all the numbers. Like, here's how we're doing in terms of MRR. Here's the help that we need. Here's the traction with the product usage and all that. And I think that's great. And if you're able to do that, I think that's going to help you build an audience, because people are going to fall in love with you.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. Hey, it's been a pleasure, Eric. And your book Leveling Up is out very, very soon on hard copy, and also Amazon Kindle and audiobook. It's the 24th of January 2021 is what I believe. February. Oh, it's a month off. I knew it was the 24th. So if you're listening to this after the 24th of February, you can go there right now and get Leveling Up. Just go to levelingup.com. Is that the best place for people to go, Eric?
Yeah, levelingup.com is perfect.
Perfect. Hey, thank you so much for being here. If people want to follow you and stay in touch, where can they do so?
Yeah, they can do Twitter or Instagram. It's at Eric O Siu, and I've been hanging out a lot on Clubhouse, same username at Eric O Siu.
Beautiful. Thanks, Eric. And thank you everyone for watching or listening, and we'll see you next time.